These days, if you mention George R.R. Martin, almost everyone thinks Game of Thrones, or Song of Ice and Fire, depending on what medium brought you to it. But my favorite of his stories is a short story from 1978, The Way of Cross and Dragon. We begin with Father Damien Harvaris, an inquisitor for the one true interstellar Catholic Church of the Earth and the Thousand Worlds. He's kind of burned out. He doesn't feel the zeal in putting down the minor heresies he's been dealing with, and he doesn't want to be standing in the Archbishop's chambers ruining another pair of boots and the water sloshing over the floor. Archbishop Torgathon is a big space hippo kind of dude, and whenever he moves around, the water in his pool sloshes over onto the floor. Not all these splintered churches allow non-humans to serve as clergy, but this one does. Warily, he asked the Archbishop about the heresy he's being sent to quash. "They have made a saint," he said, "out of Judas Iscariot." And so Father Damien heads out to the planet Arion to deal with this heresy. On the way, he reads their holy text, The Way of Cross and Dragon. It tells the story of Judas, born a whoreson in Babylon. In his youth, he experimented with black magic, necromancy, and in time learned to bend dragons to his will. He became Judas the Conqueror, Dragon King, ruler of Babylon and a vast empire. He presided over the trial of Jesus of Nazareth, hacking off his legs and casting him back out into the streets while sneering, "Healer, heal thyself." But in time his eyes were opened. Judas repented and gave up the crown. He forsook the dark arts and went to find Jesus, whom he carried across the lands he once ruled. And when Jesus at last did heal himself, they walked together. He sent Judas to deliver his word across the ocean. But in time, Jesus had another run-in with the law. There came a day when the sun went dark at noon and the ground trembled, and Judas swung his dragon around on ponderous wings and flew back across the raging seas. But when he reached the city of Jerusalem, he found Christ dead on the cross. Judas completely lost it. 3 days of wrath like a storm across the ancient world. And when he finds and questions the other disciples, he learns that Peter betrayed Christ. Judas strangles him. On the third day, Christ rose. He rebuked Judas, who in his rage had abandoned all his teachings. He took from Judas his magic, his dragons, and his sight, for he had acted as a blind man. The text makes several references to the accompanying painting of the blind Judas weeping over the bodies of his dragons. He's also not allowed to die until he's had a good long think about what he's done. Bad Judas. Finally, after many generations had passed, Jesus came to him and they were reconciled. And he told Judas that someday the truth of who he had been would again be known. Father Damien is intrigued by the book, both its story and the accompanying artwork of key moments in the life of St. Judas. He shows the book to his ship's captain, a non-believer hired from a mercenary crew. She too finds it interesting, especially that painting of weeping Judas and the dragons. I smiled to see that it had affected her as much as me. Then I frowned. That was the first inkling I had of the difficulties ahead. Father Damien gets all gothed up. A severe black suit with deep burgundy lapels and stiff collar. Around my neck was a splendid crucifix of pure gold. My collar pin was a matching golden sword, the sigil of the Knights Inquisitor. Brother Dents carefully painted my nails, all black as ebon, and darkened my eyes as well, and used a fine white powder on my face. When I glanced in the mirror, I frightened even myself. I smiled, but only briefly. It ruined the effect. And he goes to meet the head of the heretical Church of Judas, a former priest calling himself Lucian Judason. There are a lot of ways for this to go, and when I first read it decades ago, I expected a fairly obvious battle of wits between advocates of competing religions. But with excellent pacing, at that moment, Martin spins it in a different direction. Lucian isn't a wild-eyed prophet at all. No, I made it all up. But he isn't a grifter either. The whole Judas dragon religion isn't about donations or tax exemptions. It's, according to Lucian, just as valid and invalid as any other faith. Now I'm going to tell you the truth, he said. He said it in an odd way, almost as a cant. I am a liar, he added. You want to confuse me with Child's paradoxes, I snapped. No, he smiled. A liar, with a capital. It is an organization, Father Damien, a religion you might call it. The liars are kind of the ultimate secret society, and they guide humanity by crafting lies appropriate to a given time and place. Not just religions, but anything that helps people shield themselves from the dread of facing a meaningless existence. It's a grim view, so much so that the liars themselves have to take a few things on faith. Faith is always required. There are some things that cannot be proven. We believe that life is worth living. This is an article of faith. The whole exchange is revealed as a recruiting pitch of sorts. Somehow Lucian knows that Damien is weary, that he no longer has the zeal required of an inquisitor. His faith is shaken and he's just going through the motions. My faith sustains me against such nihilism. It is a shield against despair. Oh, I know that, my friend, my Knight Inquisitor, Lucian said. I'm glad to see you understand so well. You are almost one of us already. Lucian takes him to meet John Azure Cross, one of the liars, a shriveled little creature in a jar, also a telepath. I had led pogroms against other telepaths, children mostly, on other worlds. The Church teaches that the psionic powers are one of Satan's traps. They are not mentioned in the Bible. I have never felt good about those killings. Damien and the telepath Cross have their own conversation, or attempt at conversation. It's almost successful. Damien's faith is tattered and ripe to collapse, but not completely rotten. He still believes in the idea of the truth. Even when it's difficult to face, he values painful truth over comforting lies. He is lost to us, said the telepath with the mocking name of Cross. But he lets Damien go, telling him that you can't hurt us, which the Inquisitor dismisses as bluster as he goes on to discredit the Judas cult. He exposes Cross down there in the basement, puts him on trial. But in the end, there's nothing they can really do. Neither being a telepath nor being involved with the Church of Judas were crimes on that world. Father Damien and the Church also purged the false history that had been inserted into the planet's libraries and data networks. Nothing so crude as inserting Judas theology directly into the secular text, but subtle edits in ways that support the stories for anyone looking into them. Judas Iscariot is mentioned in passing as a conquering king of Babylon. There are subtle changes to Roman history. Most bluntly, dragons are said to have gone extinct on old Earth around the time of Christ. We finally purged all those lies, wiped them from the memories of the computers, though we had to cite authorities on a half-dozen non-Christian worlds before the librarians and academics would credit that the differences were anything more than a question of religious preference. This is one of the things that stayed with me over the decades since I first read The Way of Cross and Dragon. The liars are storytellers trying to hold back a wave of existential dread and despair. Their goal, at least the stated goal of the liars, isn't to deceive for its own sake, but to create a philosophical scaffolding that gives meaning to meaninglessness. It's religion or politics, whatever one needs to make sense of things. Our world has it, of course. It's built on narratives. Our political divisions and wars are at their core mostly just disagreements over stories we tell ourselves. I think of Dune. The Bene Gesserit are liars, crafting stories to shape the universe, including the prophecy at the heart of Paul's rise. And of course, what is history but the process of collecting data points about the past and arranging them in a story about what happened and why? Some of the stories are more grounded, rational, and factually defensible than others, but they're all narrative constructs. Which is why history is always political to some extent, and on some level we all know that the liars have a point. We need those stories to give meaning and purpose. It's how we understand the world and our place in it. Our lies can even be true for the most part, just far short of the truth. When Father Damien next finds himself standing in Archbishop Torgathon's chamber, wearing his worst boots in the sloshing water, he's again reminded of this, and he announces his resignation. For what cause? Torgathon rumbled, splashing feebly. I have lost my faith, I said to him simply. His resignation is not accepted. Loss of faith is not reason enough to be released from duty, even for the Inquisition. Your faith is a matter between you and your confessor. I care only about your results. And so he sets out investigating heresies, no longer as a true believer bearing the righteous sword of the Almighty, but as a man deconstructing stories. I imagine him continuing his work with this new outlook, discrediting the heresies to aid another story that he believes is better for people, not necessarily more true. And this man, once a zealot and now some fusion of a policy wonk and a literary critic, puts down the most egregious lies, not because they're false, but because they're damaging, traveling between the stars in a ship he named Dragon. And you know, I think there's a powerful lesson and no small bit of comfort to be taken from that. You're going to pick your bullshit in life. It's just how it works. But if you know that even the most useful, moral, productive, or righteous bullshit is still a story you tell yourself, well, you'll probably be a lot happier and much less of a dick than the people that can't smell what they're standing in. This is one where, as I'm recording it, I'm not really sure what I'm going to use for B-roll. I'm probably going to end up taking some clips from Game of Thrones that thematically fit and also kind of show the seeds of Martin's later work as he progressed through the decades. But it remains to be seen if I will succumb to the heresy of AI artwork. By now you'll already know. Oh shit, the Inquisition!